The awakening, the cold, metallic hum of the cryogenic chamber echoed in John Blake's ears as he slowly regained consciousness. His eyes flickered open, blurry and disoriented. His mind struggled to process the strange surroundings, and for a moment he wasn't sure if he was still dreaming or if he had truly woken up. His body felt heavy, his muscles stiff and unresponsive, as though he had been asleep for a very long time. He tried to move, but his limbs were sluggish. The cold, sterile environment around him was unfamiliar. He had been in a sleep chamber for what felt like forever. 15,000 years, John thought, his mind racing to remember. 15,000 years in suspended animation. That was the plan. He had volunteered for this. He was part of an experimental program that aimed to preserve human life during the darkest days of Earth's future. A future that was uncertain, ravaged by wars, and filled with extinction-level threats. Humanity had sent people like him brave, foolish, or desperate into deep space sleep to escape it all. He had been frozen, placed into a cryogenic chamber, and left to sleep through an uncertain future, hoping to awaken when things were better. The glass door of the chamber slid open with a hiss, and John felt a rush of cold air hit his face. He sat up slowly, blinking to clear his vision. The light from above flickered as he adjusted, trying to piece together the reality of the moment. His mind raced. What year was it? What had happened to Earth? Where was everyone? He had no answers. Questions. The room was quiet, the only sound coming from the faint whir of mechanical systems. The walls around him were metal and cold, and everything looked old. Not just aged, but abandoned. There was a layer of dust on the floor, as if no one had been there in years. There were no signs of life, no signs of movement. John's heart began to race as he stood, unsteady on his feet. He looked around the room, searching for any signs of a way out. The control panels were inactive, their screens dark. The only source of light came from overhead, casting eerie shadows across the space. It was like waking up in a tomb. Hello. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it echoed in the emptiness. He coughed, trying to clear the dryness from his throat. Is anyone there? The silence that followed was deafening. There was no reply. John stumbled forward, pressing his hand against the wall to steady himself. His mind was a blur, trying to understand the situation. 15,000 years had passed since the cryogenic process had begun, but why was he waking up now? Why was there no one here? As he moved toward the exit, a cold wave of panic washed over him. He tried to calm himself. Stay calm, John. Stay calm and think. Think about what you know. The program had been designed to wake humanity from the deepest sleep once Earth was stable again, but everything felt off. The silence, the desolation, it was as if something had gone horribly wrong. Humanity had not been saved. He had been left behind. He stepped into the hallway, the dim lights flickering. As he walked, it was a long, narrow corridor with more doors and rooms, but there were no sounds, no signs of life at all. The place felt like a graveyard. He passed other chambers, like his own, empty, the doors shut, cold and dark. Suddenly, a thought hit him like a bolt of lightning. What if I'm the only one left? He rushed to the nearest console and tried to activate it, his fingers moving frantically over the controls. The screen flickered to life, showing data that made no sense to him. The interface was outdated, like something from a different agent. The information was incomplete, but one word jumped out at him. Evacuation complete. Evacuation. His pulse quickened. He had thought humanity was supposed to rise again, to rebuild, but instead he was left alone. Thousands of years after the fact, John's mind began to race. He couldn't accept this. Where is everyone? He moved quickly through the empty hallways, searching for anything, anyone. He tried every door, every panel, but there was no response, no signs of life. The corridors were abandoned, their silence growing heavier with each step. His footsteps echoed in the halls, and he realized that the sound of his own steps was the only sound in this massive, empty place. The thought struck him like a punch. In the gut, what happened to humanity? Eventually, he stumbled upon a small room filled with old equipment. A small flickering screen at the back of the room displayed an old news broadcast. The audio distorted, but the image was clear. He focused on it, trying to hear what it was saying. A mass exodus from Earth. The colonies. The audio was cut off by a burst of static. The last group of humans, heading for the stars. The message ended abruptly, and the screen went black. John's breath caught in his chest. The colonies, the last group of humans, heading for the stars. Something was very wrong. The humans were gone, but where had they gone? Was Earth destroyed? Had they left him behind by accident? Or had humanity been wiped out entirely? These were the questions gnawing at him, but there were no answers. John's mind raced with fear and confusion, but one thing was certain. He was alone. Alone in a world that was no longer his. His fingers trembled as he reached for a nearby console, desperately searching for any clue, any explanation. But the screen remained blank, mocking him with its silence. John Blake, a man from a long-lost age, had woken up to a world that had forgotten him, a world where humanity had vanished without a trace. What had happened to them? And, more importantly, what was he supposed to do now? He took a deep breath, staring at the dark screen. There was no going back now. He had to find out what had happened, whether the world was destroyed or if humanity had simply left. Either way, the future was now in his hands. And as he stood in that abandoned room, the weight of 15,000 years of silence crashing down upon him, he realized that his journey was only beginning. The last echoes. John stood in the abandoned room, staring at the blank screen, his mind racing. The silence of the facility around him was suffocating. 15,000 years had passed, and humanity, his civilization, was gone. He couldn't comprehend it. How had they disappeared? Had Earth been destroyed? Had the colonies failed? His pulse raced as he slowly walked back into the hallway, the cold air biting at his skin. The deep hum of the facility was the only sound, a mechanical noise that seemed to mock his confusion. He needed answers. He couldn't just wander through this empty place, waiting for something to happen. The corridors stretched out before him, silent and lifeless. He moved forward, his steps echoing through the vast, desolate facility. Every door he tried was locked or unresponsive. No signs of life, no signs of anything that could explain what had happened. He paused in front of a large window, looking out into the dark sky. The stars seemed the same as they had before, distant and cold, but there was a strange emptiness in the air now. The moon, once a familiar sight, seemed distant, as though it belonged to a different age, different world. He turned away from the window and began walking again, his footsteps growing heavier with each passing second. Where was everyone? What had happened to humanity? As he walked, the questions began to swirl in his mind, each one more insistent than the last. He had been part of the experiment to save humanity. Was this the end of it all? He found another room, this one slightly different, small office of sorts. The desk inside was covered in dust, but there was still a faint light coming from the old terminal on the desk. His fingers hesitated before pressing a button, bringing the screen to life. The screen flickered to life, displaying an old security footage feed. The image was shaky, distorted, but the voice came through clearly, though crackling. Evacuation procedures are in effect. The last of the transports are leaving Earth, and the remaining colonies are prepared for departure. I repeat, the last of the human population has been evacuated to the outer colonies. Earth will be closed off to prevent further ... contamination. Our mission is clear. We are leaving the cradle of humanity behind, but we must. The feed cut off abruptly, the screen going blank, leaving John staring at the empty monitor in disbelief. He couldn't believe it. Earth had been abandoned. Humanity had left. But why? What had happened that had forced them to leave? What was this contamination they mentioned? John's heart sank as the reality began to set in. Humanity had abandoned Earth, left it behind. And he, who had volunteered for the cryogenic program, had been left behind too. Was he the last human left alive? He needed to find more information, more answers. He couldn't just stand there, trapped in a forgotten world. Searching for clues, determined to uncover the truth. John set off down another corridor, this one leading to a series of smaller chambers. He tried every door, opening each one carefully, praying for some sign of life, but found only emptiness. No people, no other survivors. The silence was deafening. Finally, he found a storage room filled with old equipment and archived materials. There were boxes stacked against the walls, covered in dust, as though they hadn't been touched in centuries. The contents of the boxes were all labeled with faded, yellowing tape. He pulled out one of the boxes, his hands trembling as he opened it, revealing old documents, reports, logs, and mission plans. It was a goldmine of information, but the words were hard to read. The handwriting almost faded beyond recognition. John sifted through the papers, his eyes scanning for anything that might explain the disappearance of humanity. And then he found something, a datapad hidden at the bottom of the box. The screen was cracked, but it still powered on. A short message blinked into life to anyone. Who finds this? ... John's breath caught. The message was for him. It was a desperate plea from someone long forgotten. We tried to warn them. The experiments, they went too far. Humanity's last hope was leaving Earth, but we made a terrible mistake. There was a force, something beyond our understanding, that we couldn't contain. The contamination was not a disease, it was something far worse, something we never expected to find. It's coming for Earth. Please, do not return. The message ended there, abruptly cut off, as though the sender had been silenced before they could finish. John felt his blood run cold. What was this force? What had humanity awakened, and why was it so dangerous that it required the entire species to leave Earth? The word contamination now took on a far more sinister meaning. Was this the reason humanity had vanished? Had they left to escape some horrific threat that no one could contain? And the more pressing question, why had he been left behind? Was he part of the problem? Or had he been forgotten, left to live alone in a deserted world? John closed his eyes. For a moment, trying to process everything he had just read. His mind was filled with questions. But one thing was clear. He was the last human alive on Earth. The rest of humanity was gone. And whatever had forced them to flee, whatever this force was, had stayed behind. He couldn't afford to sit idle anymore. He needed to find out everything what the force was, why Earth had been abandoned, and if there was any hope left for humanity's survival. John Blake had woken up to a world of silence. Now he had to find a way to survive in it, and perhaps, just maybe, discover what had destroyed humanity and why he was the only one left. The search for the truth. As he walked through the facility, John knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to give up. There had to be more answers out there. Somewhere, buried deep in the ruins of Earth, lay the truth, and he would find it, no matter what. The fate of humanity and, possibly the fate of the galaxy, was in his hands now. But time was running out. Something out there was waiting for him, and he had no idea if it would bring him salvation or doom. Asterisk, the hidden legacy, the silence around. John felt suffocating as he ventured deeper into the abandoned facility. Each step he took reverberated in the emptiness. Each door he opened only revealed more of the same empty rooms, dust-covered furniture, and outdated technology. But there had to be someone still out there. Earth couldn't be. This empty humanity had to have left something behind. After hours of searching, John found something unexpected. A hidden door tucked away in a corner of the facility's lower levels. It was old, its edges worn and coated with dust, but there was a faint hum coming from behind it. His heart raced. He had been searching for answers for so long, and now this door seemed to hold the key to whatever had happened to humanity. With a grunt, he pushed it open. The room behind the door was unlike anything he had seen before. It wasn't a typical storage room or research lab. Instead, it was filled with holographic screens, terminals, and ancient devices that hummed with power. At the center of the room stood a massive console, covered in layers of dust and rust, but still active, emitting a faint blue glow. John approached it cautiously, unsure of what to expect. As his fingers hovered over the dusty controls, the console flickered to life. A holographic map of the galaxy materialized in the air, showing star systems and planetary routes. But what caught John's attention was the blinking dot near the center of the galaxy. A small annotation appeared beneath it. Final transmission. Earth's last stand. John's breath caught in his throat. Earth's last stand. Had humanity tried to fight back? Were they under attack before they left? Without hesitation, he activated the holographic display, and a voice came to life, a familiar human voice. Distorted, but still clear enough to understand. This is Commander Alina Roberts of the Earth Coalition. If you are hearing this, then Earth has fallen. The threat was not what we expected. We thought we were escaping, but in doing so, we have unknowingly triggered an event far worse than the collapse of our civilization. The force we found... It was ancient, and it was waiting for us. We tried to destroy it, but we failed. If anyone finds this message, please know this our escape was a mistake. Humanity's survival... was a lie. John stood frozen, his mind spinning. What was this force? And why did they think humanity's survival had been a lie? The message continued, the force is not a weapon, it's a consciousness, an ancient intelligence that has existed beyond time, beyond our understanding. It manipulates matter and space. It feeds off civilizations, destroys them slowly, and leaves nothing in its wake. The moment we discovered it, we set in motion our doom. We should have never left Earth. Humanity's greatest mistake was trying. to escape. We could not outrun the void. The hologram flickered and then cut out abruptly, leaving the room silent again. But now, John's heart pounded with urgency. Earth had been abandoned not because of external force. Humanity had been fleeing from a hidden, far older danger. Something had lived in the dark corners of the galaxy, something that had waited for them to find it. The Force was alive, and it had taken control of their fate long before they even realized it. John's fingers trembled as he scrolled through more logs on the console. Each one was a plea, a final message from the last of humanity's leaders, detailing failed attempts to stop the Force. They had fought at least in the beginning, but it had been too powerful, too ancient. Every attempt to fight it had been fruitless, and in the end, humanity had fled, leaving Earth behind. They had sent the last of their people into space, trying to escape the Force's reach, but it was already too late. Suddenly, a new message appeared. It wasn't from Earth's leaders, but it was addressed to humanity, specifically to John. The message was short, almost cryptic, but it was enough to set his blood on fire. The Force is not gone. It's waiting for you. If you return to Earth, it will find you. The key to your survival is in the forgotten temple beneath the ruins of Earth. Seek it out. The message cut off, leaving John to wonder what it meant. What temple? Was there still hope, or was this some final warning? John clenched his fists, standing tall. He had to go back. Earth's fate was tied to whatever this Force was. If it had destroyed humanity once, it could do it again, but he wouldn't let that happen. He couldn't. He turned and sprinted back through the corridors of the facility, his heart pounding. He knew what he had to do. Now find this forgotten temple and uncover the truth behind the Force that had shattered humanity's future. The forgotten temple, the coordinates the message provided were vague, but they pointed toward Earth's abandoned ruins. It was a dangerous gamble, but John couldn't ignore the feeling deep inside him. Earth wasn't just where he had come from. It was humanity's last hope. The journey to Earth's surface was perilous. The remains of Earth were a wasteland now, a barren landscape where nature had overtaken the cities and technological marvels that had once flourished. The very air felt thick with history, the remains of human civilization slowly disintegrating under the weight of time. But the temple, whatever it was hidden in these ruins, waiting to be discovered. He ventured deep into the remains of what used to be a bustling city, now just a shell of its former self. The buildings were twisted and collapsed, overtaken by the relentless passage of time. Nature had claimed its victory, and yet John couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. Here, something ancient and powerful still lurking beneath the surface. And then, in the heart of the ruins, he found it, the entrance to the temple. It was an enormous structure, partially buried by the destruction of the city. The massive stone doors stood open, as if waiting for him. The air around it felt heavy, thick, with an energy that John couldn't explain. As he stepped inside, he felt a tan, eerie presence, like 1,000 eyes watching him, judging him. The temple's walls were covered in intricate carvings, alien symbols that twisted and shifted as if they were alive. But there was one symbol that stood out among the rest, an image of a hand reaching out with a single eye at the center of the palm. It was the same symbol that had been on the holograms and the warning messages. He took a deep breath, knowing that whatever lay ahead was going to change everything. He was on the brink of uncovering the Force's secrets to Force. That had nearly wiped out humanity. And as John descended further into the depths of the temple, he could feel it in his bones. The Force was waiting for him. And now it would face humanity's final stand. The Temple of Shadows. The air inside the temple was thick, almost oppressive. Each step John took seemed to echo louder than the last, as though the very walls of the structure were alive, responding to his presence. The flickering light from his torch cast long, shifting shadows across the walls, which were covered in intricate carvings. The carvings told stories of beings far older than humanity, of wars fought across galaxies, and of a force that had been present for eons, manipulating the rise and fall of civilizations. John's heart pounded in his chest as he moved deeper into the temple. The unsettling presence he felt in the air was growing stronger, as though it were drawing him in, beckoning him towards something hidden in the heart of the temple. The further he walked, the colder it became. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, his breath visible in the damp, chill air at the far end of the hallway. A massive door loomed ahead, intricately decorated with more alien symbols. But this door was different. It wasn't just stone. It looked almost alive. The symbols on it seemed to shift, moving like liquid, changing shape before his very eyes. As he approached, John could feel a strange pull, like the door was drawing him closer. This is it, he thought, the words echoing in his mind. This is what they were hiding. This is where everything ends. He placed his hand on the door, and immediately the symbols pulsed with light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft, almost imperceptible hum, the door began to open, revealing what lay beyond. The room inside was vast, so large that its farthest walls were shrouded in darkness. But the center of the room was illuminated by a strange, ethereal glow. In the middle of the chamber stood a massive, floating object, something that looked like a crystal, but unlike any crystal John had ever seen. It pulsed with energy, its surface shimmering as though it was alive. John stepped forward, unable to look away from the mesmerizing glow. His mind raced with questions. Was this the key? Was this the force that had manipulated humanity's past, the one that had forced them to leave Earth? As he approached the crystal, the room seemed to shift. The shadows and the corners of the room seemed to stretch toward him, as if the darkness itself was closing in. The presence he had felt outside intensified, now pressing in on him from all directions. He reached out to touch the crystal. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire room exploded with light. "You have come," the voice echoed. But it wasn't a voice at all, it was a presence, speaking directly into John's mind. The voice was ancient, timeless, like the whispers of the universe itself. "The cycle is upon you. The reckoning has begun." John's heart skipped a beat as the words washed over him. "The cycle," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, human," the voice continued. "For eons, civilizations have risen and fallen, all in the name of the cycle. And you, like those before you, have been chosen to face it." John's mind raced. Chosen. He wasn't part of some ancient prophecy. He was just a man, a survivor, from a forgotten age, who had awakened in an empty world. Yet, here he was, standing before something beyond his comprehension. Something that had waited for humanity to find it. "What do you want from me?" John asked, his voice shaky but firm. The presence didn't answer immediately. Instead, the crystal began to pulse faster, and the walls around him seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. The air grew thick, and John's thoughts became muddled. He could feel something inside him, an insidious force, tugging at the very core of his being. It was like the crystal was trying to invade his mind, trying to pull him into its dark embrace. "You are the last of your kind," the voice said, as though it had read his thoughts. "Humanity's final chance to break the cycle, but you must choose. Will you continue the pattern, or will you break free?" John stumbled backward, his mind swirling with confusion. What was it asking? The cycle. Was it referring to the endless war, the destruction of civilizations? What was his role in all of this? "The force is inevitable," the voice continued, growing stronger. "Every civilization, every species has fallen to it. But humanity, you have the chance to rise above. You have the power to end it. Will you use it?" John's mind raced. He didn't know what this force was, but it was clear that it had shaped the entire history of the galaxy, perhaps even the universe. If humanity was truly the last hope to end it, what was the price of that victory? Was he ready to bear that burden? He stepped closer to the crystal, his hand trembling. The light from it grew brighter, filling the room with an otherworldly glow. He could feel the pull in his chest, a heavy weight drawing him in, as though the crystal was calling him to take control. John began. But before he could finish, the crystal erupted with a burst of energy. The force of it knocked him off his feet, sending him crashing to the ground. His mind swam, and he felt his consciousness slipping. The room around him dissolved into darkness. His body felt weightless, as though he were floating in space. But in the void, he saw them visions of ancient civilizations, their cities crumbling as the force of the cycle swept through. He saw worlds consumed, stars fading, and empires reduced to dust. It was the cyclan, endless, unstoppable force that destroyed all life, and then, just as quickly, the vision stopped. John's breath caught in his throat as he was pulled back into the temple. The crystal was still there, but now it was dim. The presence in his mind, once overwhelming, was now silent. "You are ready." The words echoed in his mind as the temple around him began to shift and change. The crystal pulsed once more, then went dark. The energy was gone. John struggled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been shown the truth: the universe was trapped in a cycle, one that consumed all life, and humanity, for better or worse, was now the key to breaking it. But how, and at what cost? He turned and made his way back to the exit, the weight of what he had learned pressing heavily on his shoulders. The journey was far from over. If humanity was to rise again, it would not be easy. But the path forward was clear. He was the one to break the cycle, and the universe, for the first time in eons, was watching. The dark awakening as John stepped back into the cold corridors of the forgotten temple. The weight of the revelation began to settle into his bones. The power of the cycle, the force that had consumed every civilization before humanity, had now found its new test. The ancient crystal, the gateway to breaking the cycle, had chosen him. But what did that mean? What power did he truly possess? He walked with a sense of purpose, but there was also fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what might come next. He didn't know if he was ready to wield such power. The images, the visions of fallen civilizations, still haunted his mind. He had seen worlds burn, stars fade, empires crumble, all because of the cycle. But now humanity was different. Humanity had woken up to this power, and for the first time, the cycle was in danger. Was it possible to break free? Or would humanity be the next civilization to fall? His steps echoed through the silent halls as he made his way to the exit. But something was off. The air had changed. It was no longer just the eerie stillness that he had felt before it. was as if the temple itself had grown more oppressive, more alive. John's pulse quickened. He had been in the temple long enough to know that something was not right. The faint hum of energy was growing louder, and he felt a deep unease in his chest. Then, as he rounded a corner, he saw it. A shadow. At first it was small, a mere flicker at the edge of his vision. But it grew, stretching and moving, as though it had a mind of its own. A shadow that seemed to twist in unnatural ways, its shape constantly shifting. John froze. He wasn't alone anymore. The force that had been waiting in the galaxy, that had shaped the fate of countless civilizations, was now awake. And it was. Aware of him, the shadow pulsed, its form solidifying into something much darker, silhouette that seemed to stretch and distort, its edges sharp and undefined. The temperature around him dropped, and a voice, cold and unearthly, reverberated. Through the space, it was the voice of the entity, the force that had brought the cycle into existence. "You cannot escape it, human," the voice echoed. "The cycle is inevitable. You cannot break what has existed since time began. You will join the others. You will become a part of the void." John's heart raced as he stepped backward. The force had spoken before, but now it was here, in front of him. The power that had consumed the galaxy's greatest civilizations was no longer some distant, incomprehensible threat. It was right here, staring him in the face. The shadow began to take form, twisting and contorting, its edges sharp as though they could slice through the very air itself. John felt the pull of it, an overwhelming force tugging at his mind, trying to invade his thoughts. But he clenched his fists, fighting back the creeping feeling of helplessness. "No," John shouted, his voice breaking through the suffocating pressure. He couldn't back down. Not now, not after everything he had learned. Humanity had come too far to fall into this dark void. With every ounce of strength he had left, John reached out and activated the device on his wrist, the one he had found in the heart of the temple. The glowing symbol on it flared to life, sending a pulse of energy through the air. The shadow screeched, a sound like metal grinding against stone, and recoiled. For a moment, the force was weakened, and John could feel the pressure lifting from his mind. "You are foolish, human," the voice hissed. "You cannot fight what you do not understand. The cycle is ancient. It will not be undone by one insignificant life." But John wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the shadow as he pushed the device's power to its limit. The energy it gave off was unlike anything he had ever felt, pulsating, alive, and it was pushing back the entity's influence. The walls of the temple began to tremble as if responding to the clash of forces. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the device, bathing the entire chamber in radiant energy. The shadow writhed, twisting and contorting as the light overwhelmed it, but it didn't vanish. It fought back, surging toward John with a speed that was almost too fast to comprehend. John stumbled back, the light flickering in his hand as the pressure on his mind grew once more. The entity was powerful, too powerful for him to take on alone. He had thought that activating the device would end the cycle. But now he understood that this wasn't just a battle against a physical force. This was a war against the very fabric of the universe itself. "You cannot break me," the voice whispered, now a low, haunting murmur in his ears. "I am the end of all things. I am the darkness that you will never escape." In that moment, John realized that the entity wasn't just an enemy, it was the very embodiment of entropy, of destruction, of everything that had brought the galaxy to the brink of collapse. It had been waiting for him, for humanity, for someone, to challenge its existence. And now that it had found him, it was determined to make sure humanity's story ended just like all the others, swallowed by the cycle, lost in the void. "You will become nothing," the voice promised, and John could feel it, the cold finality of the words. But John, though shaken, wasn't ready to give in. He had come this far, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that humanity had always risen when faced with impossible odds. Taking a deep breath, John reached for the device again, pushing it to its maximum potential. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering and distorting, but it wasn't enough. The energy began to surge out of him into the device. This time, John felt it. The pulse of energy was not just pushing the entity away, it was tearing through the cycle itself. The walls of the temple began to shake violently as the very fabric of reality began to tear. And just as the entity let out a deafening scream, everything went white. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, silence. Absolute silence. John opened his eyes, the blinding light fading into nothingness. The shadow was gone. The entity, the force, that had controlled the galaxy for eons, was no more. The cycle was broken. He was free. But as the echoes of the battle faded into the quiet of the temple, John knew that this was only the beginning. Earth was waiting. The galaxy had just been freed from the force's grip, but the road to rebuilding, to finding humanity again, would not be easy. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's future had just begun, and John Blake, the last man standing, was ready to lead humanity into a new era. The dawn of a new age. The silence that followed the clash of energies hung heavy in the air. John's body was trembling, the exertion from battling the entity leaving him exhausted and drained. He was alone now in the dimly lit temple, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been an ancient force, now reduced to nothing but darkness. The weight of what he had just done began to settle in. The cycle and endless loop of destruction and rebirth was broken. Humanity was no longer trapped in that cycle. But what came next? The galaxy, left in the wake of a battle that spanned eons, was now without its controlling force. Could humanity truly rebuild, or had John made a mistake? Had breaking the cycle only unleashed another, far more terrifying force? John collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he tried to regain some semblance of composure. The glowing device on his wrist flickered weakly, its light pulsing in time with his heartbeat. It had been his only hope, the key to defeating the entity, and it had worked, but at what cost? He looked around the temple, which had once been the stronghold of a force that held the universe in its grasp. Now it was just a hollow shell, its purpose lost to time. The vastness of what had happened was overwhelming, and John struggled to process it all. For a moment, there was no sound. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed something that made his heart stop, faint shimmer in the air, as though reality itself were flickering. "Am I seeing things?" John whispered to himself, rubbing his eyes. But the shimmer remained, now expanding across the room, like an opening rift in space. The light grew brighter, and before John could react, a figure stepped through it. At first, he thought it was an illusion, another trick of the Force, perhaps. But as the figure emerged fully, he saw that it was human. A woman, tall and dressed in an advanced combat suit, her eyes fierce and alert. She looked at John with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. "You did it," the woman said, her voice calm but tinged with awe. "You actually did it." John's mind raced. Who was she? Had she been hiding in the temple? Was she somehow connected to the ancient force he had just destroyed? John began, but his voice faltered as he stood. His legs were weak, and he felt dizzy from the intensity of the battle. Who are you? I'm part of what was left behind, she said cryptically, stepping closer. I've been waiting for someone to come. Someone who could break the cycle, like you. John blinked, confusion clouding his mind, waiting for someone. But I was the only one left. Humanity, I thought it was gone. The woman nodded, her gaze steady. Humanity did leave. Earth was abandoned, but not everyone left. Some stayed behind, waiting for the right moment to act. We were the ones who kept the old legacy hidden. John's eyes widened. The legacy, he repeated. What legacy, and why was Earth abandoned? Because, the woman said softly, the force you defeated wasn't the only one out there. There's more. The universe is full of ancient, unseen powers, and the cycle what you just broke was just a piece of the bigger picture. A balance that's been maintained by the cosmos for millennia. John's head spun. More forces. What had he unleashed by breaking the cycle? Had he really freed humanity, or was this just the first step into something far worse? You're telling me there are more of them? John asked, his voice filled with disbelief. What do you mean, the balance? The balance, the woman explained, is what keeps the universe in check. These powers, these forces, they are the gatekeepers of existence. The cycle you just broke was the tipping point. The universe has been teetering on the edge of chaos for centuries, and the collapse of that cycle has left a void. The forces that govern time and space, they've been watching, waiting. Now they'll come. John stared at her in horror. What do we do now? She stepped closer, her expression hardening. We rebuild. But this time, we must rebuild stronger. Earth is no longer the place it once was. It's the birthplace of something much greater. Humanity's role in the galaxy is far more important than you think. But we can't do it alone. John looked at her, taking in her words. Rebuilding. Humanity had been given a second chance. But what would that chance look like? The entity he had destroyed had been powerful, but there were others who had waited for humanity to break the cycle. What kind of fight was he stepping into? We can't fight them all, John muttered, almost to himself. You don't have to fight them all, the woman said, but we have to make our stand. Humanity will not be wiped out, not again. John's gaze turned toward the shattered remnants of the temple. There was no going back. Earth was no longer just a home for humans. It had become the starting point for a much larger conflict, one that stretched across the stars. The forces that had manipulated existence were no longer hidden in the shadows. They had seen humanity's strength and resilience, and now they would come to challenge it. We'll need allies, John said, turning back to the woman. Who else is out there? Plenty, she replied with a smile. There are factions across the galaxy who still remember Earth's potential. There are those who believe humanity can change the universe, and we need to find them. If we do, we can stop what's coming. John took a deep breath, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. The universe was vast and unknown, filled with dangers they had never imagined. But Earth, with all its imperfections, had proven something. Today it was more than just a planet. It was a symbol of resistance, of defiance against the forces that tried to control it. He nodded firmly. Let's get to work. Together, they turned away from the temple's darkened interior, stepping into the unknown future. The galaxy was waiting, and humanity's place in it was no longer in question. This was the beginning of a new age, one where humanity would rise from the ashes and face the forces that had held the universe in their grip for so long. And no matter what it took, John Blake would make sure humanity's voice would be heard. The war for the future had just begun. A new dawn. The air outside the temple felt different now, alive with the energy of possibility. The endless horizon stretched before John, a vast and untamed world that was no longer bound by the limits of the past. Humanity had broken the cycle, ancient, unrelenting force that had defined their existence for eons. Now, as the last remnants of Earth's ancient power were being reawakened, John knew that the universe was watching. He stood at the edge of the ruined city, the wind brushing against his face, carrying with it a faint whisper of hope. The sky, once dark and oppressive, seemed brighter now, as though the entire world was breathing a collective sigh of relief. There was a new beginning, one that would rewrite humanity's destiny among the stars. Beside him, the woman Sarah stood tall, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had been waiting for this moment, just as John had. The time had come to rise again, to reclaim humanity's rightful place in the galaxy. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about change. "We've got work to do," Sarah said, her voice steady and calm, yet laced with urgency. "We have to rally the galaxy's survivors, find the remnants of humanity scattered across the stars, and unite them. The enemy won't wait long." John nodded. His mind was already racing through the possibilities. The forces that had been controlling the galaxy for centuries had finally revealed themselves, and they would not sit idle. But now, the universe knew that humanity had a new fire force that couldn't be snuffed out so easily. "I know," John replied. "But the question is, where do we start?" Sarah's gaze softened for a moment as she turned to face him. "We start where it all began, Earth. We'll gather our people here, rebuild what was lost, and then we go to the others, the ones still out there who believe in the human spirit. We'll forge alliances, we'll gather an army, and together we will push back the forces that have ruled us." John felt a surge of energy in his chest, the weight of the decision hanging heavily on him. This was no small task. They weren't just fighting for survival now. They were fighting for the future, for the right to determine their own fate. The stakes had never been higher. "You're right," John said. "It starts here, and we'll make sure humanity has a future, no matter the cost." Sarah nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Let's get to work. The galaxy isn't going to wait for us." John turned away from the ruins, looking toward the vast unknown. There were many battles ahead, and he knew that Earth was just the beginning. He could feel the weight of his responsibility now. It was up to him, and to those who would stand beside him, to lead humanity into this new era as they made their way back to the remnants of the city. John's thoughts drifted to the many questions still unanswered. The force they had defeated was only a piece of a much larger puzzle. What other ancient powers lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy? Who else might be out there, waiting to challenge humanity's place in the universe? And, most importantly, what kind of future would humanity create for itself? He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. Humanity had always found a way to survive, and this time they wouldn't just survive, they would thrive. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous. They would face challenges they couldn't yet imagine, enemies more powerful than they had ever known. But humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had always come through. This time would be no different. John stopped at the entrance of the city, looking back one last time at the ruins of the temple, the place where it all began. The crystal, the ancient force, the cyclolith had all led to this moment. And now, the galaxy would know that humanity would no longer stand in the shadows. "We rise together," John muttered to himself, the words like a promise. The stars above seemed to shine brighter now, as though the universe itself was waiting for humanity's next move. The future was uncertain, but the potential was limitless. Humanity's true journey had just begun, and as the first steps of this new era began, John knew that no force, no matter how ancient or powerful, could ever hold them back again. The galaxy would see humanity for what it was: resilient, defiant, and unstoppable. The true war was over, but the war for the galaxy's future had only just begun. Humanity had awakened, and the stars would never be the same again.